Today we're going to be talking about writing an abstract that's going to be tailored for the life sciences, physical sciences, and engineering research projects. But of course, writing an abstract is a common practice across many disciplines. So you'll learn from this workshop information that could be applied to any research project. I'm talking on behalf of the Undergrad Research Center, and I think a good start is an overview, and we will first talk about what an abstract is. How do you write an abstract? How do you submit your abstract for the undergrad research and creativity showcase that happens every year at UCLA? My name is Amy Than. I am a fourth year graduate student researcher in the neuroscience PhD student, and I have had my fair share of writing abstracts, editing, submitting, and also turning abstracts into poster presentations, oral presentations, and manuscripts for submission in journals. So my personal experience with abstract is that you're kind of selling the work and also um, giving a glimpse of where the project could go. And although there are a lot of stylistic choices you can make when writing an abstract, when it comes to academic projects, especially research projects, there is some sort of a rigid template or I guess, structure that is good to keep in mind when you write your abstract. So we'll start talking about that. But just know that what I share today is going to be based on my experiences, based on experiences of other graduate students. But there is no perfect one style of abstract. However, there are components that you should include, and the rest is up to you as well as up to your research discipline. Um, the undergrad research showcase at UCLA is so diverse and broad in disciplines, so you won't necessarily need to focus on having it in tip-top shape, and maybe you won't even need it to be specific to your discipline. It's more so for the audience that is broad and attending the research showcase. So that's also something that you want to keep in mind when you're writing your abstract. Who's reading it, and what do I want them to know? And so, for example, this showcase, the reader will not be from your discipline. It will be someone that is helping out the undergraduate research center. It might be a professor, it might be a graduate student. Just know that this specific project, the audience includes people that are familiar with abstracts, but not necessarily familiar with your specific research topic or your methods or your data. So just keep that in mind before we go into it. Um, the structure of an abstract generally is one concise paragraph. It's a summary that one attracts the audience, describes methods, results, and implications of your work. It's also written in past tense because at the time of submission, you should have already done the work, gotten some preliminary data, and are now interested in sharing it at a presentation or in the form of a poster. The formats may vary, as I mentioned, based on the publisher, the type of article, and the type of audience that you're writing it for. When are abstracts used? They are typically included in articles as the blurb or the summary in a manuscript or academic research journal. They also could be found in book chapters as well as for conferences like say, for example, the Undergrad Research Center's showcase. This would be a summary of the project that will be presented in depth at the conference. We can also find abstracts in patents, law, business, and indexing. So again, the practice of making or writing an abstract is pretty transferable to other purposes as well. So when you're writing an abstract, what does it include? First, you'll have the title, the author list, and the abstract text. The title should have information that is not only grabbing the attention of the reader, but also gives a overall glimpse of what's going to be talked about, maybe having keywords that are spelled out. So if you have any acronyms, you should define them if it's in the title. And also, it kind of gives you the main purpose of the study. So, for example, this study was interferon mediated reprogramming of membrane cholesterol to evade bacterial toxins. So that's pretty clear what they're trying to do. Personally, not clear to me because I'm not sure about my knowledge of immunology, but it kind of tells you the purpose of the study was to reprogram membrane cholesterol. The purpose was to evade bacterial toxins. And then the author list, I'll elaborate a little bit more. This should include anyone that's involved. There are certain criteria typically defined by the faculty mentor who should be involved. That is something that you should discuss with the lead on the project. But common practice in research is to include anyone that has contributed to this project. And the text we should maybe hold off for in a bit when we get into the nitty gritty of it. So specifically for the undergrad research showcase at UCLA, there's a 200 character limit that includes spaces. So this is about 30 words for the title. You should capitalize the first letter of all the main words. Do not capitalize article words such as a, the, and don't use any special formatting such as italics, boldface words, underlining, superscripts, or subscripts. The application system does not support this special formatting and will convert anything that you put in as plain text before submission. So make sure it's plain text when you submit it. An example of the title could be targeted and highly multiplex determination of methylation status in various cancer cell types. So this kind of tells us the main idea is targeting. What are we targeting? The determination of methylation status. And what are we comparing? Different cancer cell types. In terms of the formatting, we want to make sure that every main word is titled. So as you can see as the third one, you would want targeted, highly multiplex determination to be capitalized, and all of the supporting words like and, in to be lowercase. So to make an abstract title effective, you'd like it to describe your research very succinctly, which means concisely and also in an interesting manner. You want to use descriptive and specific terms, include the specific drug name rather than just the class of drug, for example. And you also want to use simple word order and common word combinations. So don't make it too flowery or convoluted what the title is trying to convey. You should write out scientific names in full and avoid using any abbreviations or acronyms, as well as chemical formulas or Roman numerals. Again, check with your faculty mentor. They should know a good gauge in terms of how technical your verbiage should be. So some examples. A bad one, or like maybe one that's like not as detailed or attention grabbing, should be a biology lab report. A good one would maybe be like the ones we mentioned earlier, and also sentences rather than questions. I know in research journals, there are some that are a little bit more playful, like the first one where like it says, does a specific protein damage increase in humans as they age? That's a great title, but maybe not for an abstract where you're trying to convey what you did in a project and some of your findings. So for example, it would probably better to have a title something like the effects of light and temperature on the growth of certain bacteria. So when we're breaking it down, you want to talk about first the approach, how you did it, like targeting the determination, or the effects and light and temperature. And then you want the object of interest, what you are studying, so methylation status or the growth of populations, and then the context. So in what context are you studying this in? You are studying in the context of specific cell types or specific bacteria or whatever your project may be. So these are the general expectations of a good title for abstracts. Okay, so a little bit more details about the author list. Include everyone that's contributed, separate the names by the columns. Sorry, by commas. You want to use and to separate the second to last author and the last author, which should be the lead research mentor. That is the principal investigator, the faculty mentor, or the advisor. Do not put any titles or degrees such as PhD, doctor. You should leave that out. Just use their first and last name, maybe middle name if they have that. Do not indicate any institutions. And you, as the undergrad presenter, should have your names in all capitals and first. Only undergraduates who will be presenting, which is 6 maximum, should be included as all capitals. For example, an ideal version should have the first author, which is the undergrad, full capitalized, commas to separate different people, and then the last person after the word and them being the main professor. Okay, so going into the abstract text, for the research showcase, there's a 1,550 character limit, so that's around 250 words. And you want to write this in past tense, but active voice. And I'll go over a few examples of this. Oopsies. Okay. Some components of the actual abstract text include first the introduction. So we want to introduce what problem you investigated. This could be 1 to 3 sentences. It will introduce your overall topic of your research. Also, it will provide background knowledge needed to understand the project. This is essentially a summary of why this study was conducted. For example, one intro could be skin-penetrating parasitic nematodes infect at least 1 billion people worldwide and are a greater disease burden than HIV, AIDS, or malaria. Although current treatments are effective, none prevent reinfection. Since olfaction is key in how skin-penetrating parasites find their hosts, we aim to elucidate more specific mechanisms of host seeking by examining the olfactory preferences of the possum parasite. This parasite. Okay, so this introduction is great because first, it kind of defines the topic to be around parasitic nematodes. It then talks about the importance of the lack of information about this study. Maybe like this is a research gap that they're introducing. And then they introduce what we currently know and what they want to do. So they want to know more about the mechanisms because olfaction may be very related to something that we don't currently know well in the field. You'd also want to include your hypothesis or the statement of purpose. This could be 1 to 2 sentences, and you would likely state what the study investigated and how it differs from similar studies. For example, for this specific project, a hypothesis or a statement of purpose could be, we hypothesize that the olfactory preferences of the free-living nematode are conserved in this bacteria and function in host-seeking behavior. You'll then include the experimental approach. So this is also 1 to 2 sentences, and you likely summarize important methods used to investigate the problem. So, for example, you can say that we gather data on olfactory preferences in the specific bacteria in both wild type and transgenic lines by conducting chemotaxis assays. So this is talking about the methods that you use. We also gathered data on the olfactory preferences of 4 other species. And so this is talking about what type of data was used. So this is the methods and this is what data was used. And this essentially is the experimental approach entirely. Fourth, you could include major results, which are about 1 to 2 sentences. You want to summarize only the main findings, not all the results, because there's no way for you to fit in everything that you found in one abstract. You kind of just want to summarize the main findings, which means what was a big takeaway? What information did you learn that contributes to the research gaps that you mentioned are important to address or answer? For example, for this project, a statement of main results may be, we found that free-living adults of parasitic species were strongly attracted to most fecal odorants but infected juveniles were neutral towards or strongly or propelled. Nematode olfactory preferences grouped by parasitic or free living lifestyles. Um, and then you can talk about the conclusion. What does this tell us? It suggests that olfactory preferences may be evolutionarily conserved. So these results also suggest that aversion to feces may be important in its dispersion behavior when finding hosts to infect. I know that this is a very, very specific project, but all research projects are very specific. Don't get too boggled down on this example. I want you to focus on the main components that we're seeing this writer include in their abstract. They have the introduction, the hypothesis, the experimental approach, the methods, the main results, and also the conclusion, which interprets the results. And I'm just going to go back one slide to highlight the fact that at this level, you might not have final significant results, but you're welcome to include any results that you have. Um, Conferences often accept abstracts without concrete results. As long as you convey that this is a well-designed project, you have some preliminary hypotheses, they should be included, and also they are more than welcome for many, many conference submissions. Also, many projects were conducted remotely during the pandemic and remote learning, therefore results may not be available. So it's totally fair game to submit abstracts without results. The big picture is selling the research project to be something that's interesting to present at this conference. So that's the main goal, is to convince the reader that this project should be shared at the conference, and it will stimulate good research discussion. It'll also maybe open doors to collaboration. There's a lot more flexibility with abstracts as compared to maybe a formal research article submission. So this is just to hammer home or hammer in. I'm not sure what the expression is, but just to really emphasize that it's okay to not have results at this stage of your research project. Abstracts should be preliminary and in the earlier stages of the project. Although it would be nice if you had some results to share it. Okay. So something else that you can include is the future directions of this project. This is optional. It could be just one sentence, or you can elaborate more if you have space. But you want to tell the reader why they should care about your project. For this project, an example would be, our results may enable the design of more targeted therapeutics to combat nematode infections. So it's essentially telling the reader why they should care. It's because the results from this project could help future therapies become developed or maybe become introduced in the pipeline of what research is currently being done. So I hope by this time you kind of get the sense that there is some element of persuasive communication where you are introducing what you did, what you think you'll find, what you actually found, and why this matters. So here are each of the components put together, and you can see how like color coded is very neat, but all abstracts are different. You may want to emphasize one area or the other. What's important is that you have one of each, or that you address each part, minus the future directions, which is optional. Okay, some additional writing tips is to be sure you're concise, include only important information. It's really easy in the beginning of the writing stage to kind of brain dump and like be very elaborate and try to include as much information you think is necessary for the reader to understand. But it's kind of like a balancing act between saying more and saying what's necessary for them to understand. You could say less and be a little bit more intentional with your messaging. So definitely give this kind of your attention to be concise, be simple, because the audience for this specific project, the undergrad showcase, the reader is not an expert in your field. For example, I study neuroscience, and my abstract, if I were to submit to this project, might be read by a physicist or a chemistry major or someone in the bioinformatics. I shouldn't assume that they know exactly what I'm talking about, but I shouldn't also assume that, like, I need to spell out everything from intro neuroscience to complex neuroscience. There's a level of trust, I think, between the writer and the reader. Just make sure it's not too complicated, but also not too simple, because there is a balance that needs to be done in writing abstracts. Write a single paragraph without indentation. Use past tense and active voice. And I don't think I've mentioned it, but active voice essentially um, means that you are talking as if you did the work. Say, for example, we ran this analysis, we found these results, um, and kind of injecting your personality and your agency in the process of sharing this project to the public or to the showcase people. Be careful of using it and this to improve clarity. So typically, you can find these and replace them with specific words so that it's a little bit less broad. You can also define abbreviations the first time you use them. This is very common practice and sometimes really necessary because you should assume that people know what acronyms you're using. Excuse me. But maybe there are some acronyms or abbreviations that are okay, like UCLA. You know your audience is from UCLA, so I'm pretty sure they know UCLA. Just use your best judgment, but assume that any um, scientific lingo or verbiage should be defined first, and then after you find it, you could use the abbreviation. For example, in the title, if you define an acronym in the abstract, you can just use the acronym. Or maybe it depends on your judgment, but just make sure it's defined somewhere on the abstract before you start using it regularly in the text. You should also keep your mentor involved. I am sure if they are a professor at UCLA, they've mentored plenty of students. They've seen and written a lot of abstracts themselves, and so they should be a really great resource to guide you to communicate their research in a layman's term in lay terms so that the audience at the undergrad showcase would appreciate it and also be able to follow along and provide you an appropriate level of feedback. You should also have multiple people proofread your abstract, especially friends or colleagues from different disciplines, so that they could let you know if some parts of your abstract are a little too technical, too specific, or maybe if they can read it without getting lost. That's a good sign that your abstract is well tailored. You should avoid having too much information. I'm not going to read this, but you can see that this abstract kind of lists out a lot of information. It has a lot of like non-essential information. So that's one waste of words because you don't have many words in your abstract, but also it's convoluted and it makes your message a little bit diluted and hard to grasp. You should also avoid using jargon. So, for example, words that are just too complex um, to the like fault of the message that's being conveyed. For example, the predominant concept could have just been a main concept. Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. You shouldn't have any incomplete sentences, so make sure you have someone proofread just in case you miss it your first few times of writing it. Also, try to avoid kind of leaving the reader in the dark for certain ideas. For example, if your abstract said, we have used infrared reflectance to study the effects of melt recrystallization on the structure of thin polymer films. Honestly, what does this mean? So first you would have to kind of explain to the reader what are infrared reflectance, what is melt recrystallization, what are thin polymer films? So make sure you can read it and think back to before you worked on this project if you're able to follow. That's also a really great gauge in case you don't have another reader to kind of check you in terms of providing enough context. You also want to avoid bibliographic citations because that's something that you would include in the poster or the main presentation. You don't need to include citations for this specific conference abstract. Don't be wordy or have long sentences. Over 2 lines long is too long. The term significant should not be used unless there has been statistical analyses to prove significance. So if you ran certain statistical tests, you can say it's significant. But if you're just trying to say that your work is important, just say important. But the word significance is a loaded term in terms of research. So only use it if you actually have statistically significant data to share. Some common abstract problems are missing the abstract altogether, as in like submitting it empty, including only the background information. So you should only have a few sentences of background information. The main meat of your abstract should be your project, the methods, and the results. Be sure you don't miss any information. Remember to include what the purpose of the study was, what the methods were, what were the major results, or having accomplished what you have accomplished to date. What do you think these results mean? Any interpretations you might have, or any implications on the research field that your work, this project could have. And I know at the undergrad level, you're doing projects that you might not have had a lot of time to really read literature up on, and you might feel overwhelmed with having to interpret the data, but that's where great mentors are helpful and useful and there for. So definitely reach out to your mentors to help you interpret any data or results that you want to share in your abstract. Also, some students may include too much information. Just remember that 1 to 2 sentences per section is sufficient. And when I say section, I mean the main components of an abstract. So what if you don't have enough data? Abstract doesn't need to include final results at all, as I mentioned before. You should include any preliminary results that you have. You should mention the results that you expect to obtain. Say this is an ongoing project. By the time that you present the poster, you might have more data. So whatever data you think you will get, you're welcome to share in your abstract. Also, you should know that in research, unexpected and negative results occur very often. They can still be useful information to share. So if you have non-significant results or maybe results that didn't align with your hypotheses, you're still encouraged to share them. That's a good, also like a good ethical practice of science, is so that in the future, when students that are interested in the same project that you did, they will know what didn't work, or they would know what they'd have to figure out in terms of unexpected results. Like, it's contributing good science means significant and non-significant results. In any case, whether you have complete, partial, projected, or unexpected results, keep in mind that your explanation of those results, their significance, is more important than the raw results themselves. Remember that research is a kind of like a process. You won't have clear, concrete beginning, middle, and end by the time you submit your abstract. This abstract should just capture where you're at currently and where you think you could get to by the time that you present the poster. Okay, so these are examples of abstracts that you're welcome to go over. I think it's really great to read abstracts in your research field as inspiration and also as a gauge of what's commonly flushed out. Sorry, that took me a while to think. But when I look at abstracts from my field, I see certain methods not being mentioned because maybe everyone in this field knows about it. You can look at abstract examples, maybe even specifically undergrad abstract examples to see the depth that students go to, um, the depth that is necessary, but also enough to convey the importance of your project. That's where you want to be at. Here's another example, and I think that there's plenty more on the internet, but they definitely vary. And you're welcome to maybe screenshot and read these afterwards. So a bad version versus a good version, I think the main differences are defining terms that might need a little bit more context and also including adequate interpretation of the data. So this is clearly outdated, but I encourage you all to submit your abstracts to the Undergrad Research and Creativity Showcase. Um, these showcases that happen every year include over 1,500 undergrads presenting their research. It's open to all majors and grade levels, and it's about 5 to 10 minutes of a pre-recorded or live stream presentation. Don't mind the dates because they are outdated, but I assure you that all the information I shared prior is still valid. Be sure to check our website at the Undergrad Research Center's um, website to get the specific dates for submission. Okay. The application should be on My UCLA, and the survey is under Campus Life. Okay. Cool. Some other guidelines to include and share with you all is that there is a 200 character limit for the title, 1,550 character limit for the text. Don't use any special formatting, and up to 6 undergrad presenters are allowed per abstract. Only one presenter need to submit an abstract for a group presentation though. Here is the survey to submit a abstract. Again, the dates might not be the same every year. And for closing remarks, don't be a statistic. This is a very personal and common experience that many people go through in research is kind of pitching your research, injecting your voice in, and just sharing why you think your research is interesting and important. Um, I'll leave it at that. Write your abstract to grab attention to the work. Consult with your faculty mentor and or your supervisor before submitting. And you can get feedback on your abstract. We still do the feedback sessions. You can meet with a graduate student mentor for 15-minute feedback sessions. You can find them at the URC event page. Yay, so now you can write an effective abstract. If you found this helpful, you can find more help at our website, sciences.ugresearch.ucla.edu. Thank you so much for your time.